Hi guys, welcome grade 11 Mindsetters, and this is going to be a fantastic show. Kathy?
I wonder if they can see this.
I wonder if they can. This is just my lunch, guys. I hope you guys don't mind me eating while we're doing the live show. Is that okay? Fantastic. Guys, today we're going to be chatting about the skeleton, and Kathy's going to tell you more about that now.
What we've got is, if you look at this, I'm going to turn this bone over, okay? All right, this would be the femur. Now, if you look at this little part here, it sticks out and around. This little piece that sticks out and around here is the ball that fits into the socket of the hip, okay? So this is, because we're going to do joints next week, so we've got the ball of the femur. All right, now, we're going to, if you look at this, you've got a wide part here and a wide part here, and that is the epiphysis, or the head, the epiphysis. And then you've got the shaft here, which is the longer part here, which is called the diaphysis. It would depend on what your teacher wants, but the head and the shaft, or the epiphysis, and the diaphysis. There you've got this nice little round blob, which is the same as this one here, okay? But what we've done is we've cut it in half. Our wonderful butcher has cut this in half so that you can see what's going on in here. Now, if we look here, you can see this is all, let me put the pen here, this is all rock hard. Okay, it is as hard as nails. And then you'll see that there's a slightly redder part all the way in here. Come on, come in close, close, close. There we go. You see there? All around there. And that's the perimystium. And in there is where you're going to find your blood vessels, and the nerves are in there. Okay. So when people break their bones and they have like a hairline fracture, and you think, oh, for heaven's sake, it's a hairline fracture, and a person is wobbling around and they are in excruciating pain and no one can understand it because it's a hairline fracture, it's because this part has now been broken into and the nerves are exposed. All right, people, so we've got the compact bone which makes up the shaft, and then, and you'll see it better here, let me take it like this. All right, if you have a look here. There is your shaft, okay, or the diaphysis, and there's the compact bone. Indy, can you see?
I can.
Okay.
Let me get it nice and close.
In fact, let's just do this.
Let's just wipe it clean. Okay? We'll just wipe it clean.
We need a tissue, okay? You wipe it clean. There's your compact bone, and it's really hard. I mean, I'm scratching here with this pen, and it does nothing. And then the perimystium is in here, and that's where your blood vessels and your nerves will be all the way around there. But now look here. In the shaft, the compact bone, which is really hard, is very thick. Okay, it's about half a centimeter, or it's almost a centimeter thick here. Whereas if you look around here, it's thin. It's thin. Why? Because its job here is not so much to protect. Why? Because it fits into either the knee, all right, joint, or into the hip. But what we've got here, and I'm sorry I don't have I'm going to try and do it with my nail.
Oh, you're going to break your lovely nails.
Hey, listen.
Oh, no.
This is sorbet.
I'll be upset.
Sorbet the wedge. Okay, it's not really working. But if I could have, I would have shown you that you can actually peel this back. And this part here is cartilage. And the reason the cartilage is there is because it makes sure that there's no grinding of the bones when they're sitting in either the knee joint or the hip joint. Very clever. And very often you'll hear people had a hip replacement. And a hip replacement is actually just replacing this part of the hip. In other words, where the bone starts to grind, because the cartilage isn't there anymore, they almost put like a plastic cap around it.
I've had a friend that's had that surgery before.
And it is very sore, because you must remember, right inside the compact bone, which is so thin over here, that's where you're going to find all the nerves.
It's a lot of athletes and things.
Yes, it's from working those joints so much, okay, and putting so much stress on them, because very often, and this, people, is something that's really important.
Yeah.
Indeed, very often, athletes, when they get hurt, will carry on, and their coaches will say to them, fussbait. Just bite back that pain. Be a man.
Well, you know what it's like in school. Like,
listen,
come on, you know, you've got
I've
another
got a son
meeting.
who plays rugby, okay, and he has played with injuries that I shudder, but the coach is, come on, you have to be a man. Just suck it up. Just suck it up. And then you end up with knee replacements and things like that when you, and hip replacements
No,
when
my
you get
friend
older.
she's my age and she's had both her knees replaced.
Wow.
She's a hockey player. She's a hockey player, so I don't know.
But again,
Yeah.
but you'd find hockey players would have a lot of injuries on their ankles, really,
Yeah.
but their knees because they're twisting.
Yeah.
And you have to stop, especially on the Astro. Okay, now people, this is very important. If you have a look, and I'm really battling, let's see.
What are you trying to do? You're trying to get
I
some
want to
like,
show them
blood.
that this here, but it's got some blood that's come in from the perimesteum here, but this is your yellow marrow. This is your yellow bone marrow, okay? And this here is your red bone marrow. And it's here that your red blood cells are made. All right? So very important, this here, red blood, and your yellow bone marrow. If we look at this one, there's your red bone marrow and your yellow bone marrow. All right? So it doesn't really look yellow, but
No, but you can definitely see the difference.
definitely different. And this is where the red blood cells are made. Here's Giles. Now, you've got to remember that the whole skeleton is divided into two parts. Okay, Morne, we have this, okay, which is the skull, and we have the spinal cord with the chest cavity, okay. This forms our axial skeleton, okay. The head, there, and this, and the spinal cord. That's our axial skeleton. Then we have, you know, when they put in a textbook an appendix, and it's sort of like the extra parts, okay? So we have the axial skeleton, and then we have the appendicular skeleton. It's the appendix. It's what's added on is the arms and the legs, okay? So you've got the pelvis and the legs, and you've got the shoulders and the arms. So what do we call this? So we have our appendicular skeleton, and this is our pelvic girdle with arms. I mean, our pectoral girdle with arms. And the guys will tell you that, especially the gymmy, muscular, sporty guys will talk about their pecs, okay? And their pecs sort of are the muscles that go across here. And sometimes, DJ Fresh the other day, I was riding in my car, or driving in my car, and he was saying that he could flex his pecs, and he was doing it, and Poppy in the studio nearly had a heart attack. Okay, so some guys can make their pecs flex, but this is your pectoral girdle and your pelvic girdle. All right, so two skeletons. So if you give us a minute, Morne, let me quickly just write this for our learners. Okay, we have our skeleton, the human skeleton, which is an internal skeleton. Okay, it's internal, it's inside the body. Okay, and it's divided into two parts. We have the axial skeleton and the appendicular skeleton. All right, axial skeleton is made up of the skull, okay, and the spinal cord, or the vertebra that make up, not the spinal cord, the vertebra, okay, which makes up the spine. Okay, now appendicular is got two parts. We've got the pelvic girdle and arms, and legs, the pelvis, and on this side we have the pectoral pectoral girdle and arms. And just remember that DJ Fresh flexes his pecs. And if you know a guy that can do it, only guys that spend a lot of time in a gym can actually flex those pecs. Okay, so we go back to our little chappy. Should we just maybe get a blank page here? Oh, that's cartilage. Well, it doesn't matter. We'll leave the cartilage on here. So we've at least just got black behind us. Okay, here we go. All right, Giles. Let's put this here. Okay, this whole thing, sorry, Giles, this whole thing is called a skull. Okay, and you have the skull and crossbones, and that they used to use on the days of the pirates to scare everyone. But what this is, it's divided into basic bone structures. Now you've got sutures, which are joints of the bones on top of the skull. Okay, this is called the cranium. So we have the cranium, then the zygomorphic bones here, which make up the facial bones, and then we have the upper jaw and the lower jaw. And the lower jaw is what talks. That's why we are able to move our mouths. The upper jaw doesn't move. It's just the lower jaw. And the lower jaw is attached in here. All right? And the fact that it's attached in there, we can sometimes a person gets a big whack on the jaw, or like in boxing or in rugby, you get a big whack and they say your jaw is dislocated. And literally, it does that. And this little structure here comes out of its gap in there, or its little process that's in there. So this is what we have, and this is why we are able to chew. In both the jaws, we have sort of cavities, and through those cavities is where we're going to have our teeth. Now, Mornay, if you have a look, just if you can zoom in over here, this is the nasal cavity. And what you feel at the end of your nose, okay, so if we can just go to other camera, this thing here that can move around, this is made of hyaline cartilage and it's nice and soft. All right, this gives us our shape and it's based on our genetics. And this part here is what's actually made of the bone. So if somebody, for example, gets a real bad whack here, this bone can actually shift into the brain and it can actually kill the person. So we want to avoid that. Now, if we look at this skull, what is its job? Because it's part of the axial skull, or axial skeleton, what is its job? It's to protect the brain that sits inside here. So we have the cranium, the facial bones, and the lower jaw. And that makes up the skull. All right. Now, why is it here? It's to protect the brain, which is the soft tissue. What else does it protect? It protects the eyes. Okay, so it protects the eyes and those orbits here. The eye fits into here. Now, if you can actually, Mornay, go right in, and if the learners can see right in the back here, hang on, there we go. There's like a hole there, and that is where the optic nerve is going to go into the brain, and you have what's called an optic chiasma, which happens across the middle of the brain, so that what you see with your left eye is perceived by the right side of your brain, or sorry, your left eye, the right side of your brain, the right eye, the left side of the brain. Okay, but it goes in the back over here. And then clearly you have points of attachment all around the skull for your muscles to move your face so that you actually have facial movements. Now you'll notice that when people have had too much Botox, they are incapable of moving the facial muscles. Why? Because Botox paralyzes the muscles. And although that makes the wrinkles straight, it means that the person is incapable of actually showing anything special in their faces. All right, Giles, you have
Kathy,
to go onto the ground.
Don't put Giles away yet. You know how much I love Giles. I want to speak to him.
Well, would you like to keep him there with you?
Well, what I would like to know is the cranial bone.
Yes.
Is the cranial bone a type of irregular bone?
It's an irregular bone.
Is it?
And you have your sutures that are all around here as well. Now, something else, just while we're talking about that, is you'll notice that with newborn babies, in fact, until a baby's about a year old, if you touch the middle of their head over here, okay, here, there's a hole. Okay, well, Giles has got a hole because it goes onto the pen. But there's a hole here, there's like a cavity, and that's because these bones actually knit across as the baby comes through the pelvis. So as that baby comes through the mother's pelvis over here, the bones of the brain actually overlock. The baby comes out, the bones go back to where they're supposed to be, and we then end up with this nice, soft, mushy place in the middle here. And slowly the bones grow together. All right, happy, Indiana?
Thank you. I completely understand
do you want
now.
Giles's?
Can I? Can I
yeah,
have?
let him
Yes.
sit there with you.
I want
Okay.
to see this cranial bone.
All right,
Let's see.
now we go on to the spinal cord. People, the spinal cord, the spinal bones, very important. Why? Because we have our spinal cord that passes down the center of this thing, okay? In between these irregular bones, we have, and Mona, if you can come in here, you can actually notice these dark places, and then you've got white, and then there's dark and white. What we have there, this is cartilage. And what the cartilage does is it acts as a shock absorber for all the things that we do. But they allow ever so slight movement so that we can actually move forwards or backwards, okay, with our spine and our hips. All right, now, if we look at our back, I mean, I can do this. All right, and mind you, if a person is a swimmer, for example, when they're doing fly, that's exactly what they're doing. They've got this sort of ripple effect that moves around. Now, we're still dealing with the axial skeleton. We have 33 vertebrae. They are irregular bones. They have cartilage in between. The very first bone, this absolutely first bone here, is called atlas. Now, you're going to ask, why atlas? Come on, Indiana, you're a really lousy interactive pupil here.
I'm so sorry. I'm so
be
busy talking to Chris Bafana and Takalani and Devan.
You lie, man. You're busy playing with Giles. I can
okay,
see you.
okay. I'm into it. Ask me a question.
Okay, why do you think this bone is called atlas?
Sheesh. Because it's round like the
No.
world?
Okay, Atlas was a Greek god, and it's part of Greek mythology. And what Atlas did was, he carried the earth, the whole world,
Oh, well, that was a trick question.
on
now.
his shoulder. Okay, so what does the Atlas carry here? It carries the skeleton, the skull. So the skull fits on here. So your very first bone, and you must know this, people, is called the Atlas. The next one, the second bone, is called the axis. Why? Because you can turn your head around. You can go up and down, you can go sideways, and the reason for that is the axis. Axis, it can turn on its axis. Atlas makes sure that that skull is perfectly in place, all right? So we've got 7 cervical vertebrae. Cervical, part of the neck, all right? So this would be your cervical vertebra. It's your neck. So when people have an accident, generally they have whiplash. And they say, oh, you've damaged your C1, your C2, well, never your C1, because that's your atlas, and your axis, you're in big trouble. Probably you're going to end up being paralyzed if you damage these badly. But you've got your C3, your C4, and you say, oh, you walk around with one of those things around your neck to lift your back, at least your head off your neck and remove the pressure. All right, so cervical vertebra, that's when the doctors refer to C. All right, your C1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So there are 7 cervical vertebrae. Then, now, if you look here at the back, here we start with the clavicle and the scapula. These are your shoulder blades, but we're going to get to that. Then you go all the way down here, and where the ribs are is your thoracic vertebra. Then we have our lumbar vertebra. Now, you've heard about people getting a lumbar punch. And a lumbar punch is when they stick a big, fat mother of a needle into your spine to draw cerebrospinal fluid. Cerebro from the brain, spinal in the spinal column. So your cerebrospinal fluid is going to come here from your lumbar vertebra. Why? Because the gaps here are the biggest and the needles can actually fit in there. It is, if I tell you pain, take any kind of toothache you've ever had, multiply it by 1,000,000, and that's basically
And then
what
put it
the
in your
pain-
back.
And then, yeah.
And then put the pain in your back.
Yes, yes. Put it all into your bag in one specific little spot, and that's what you have. Then this is your sacrum. It's your bottom. It's your backside area here.
Some
and
people say
then
when you land on your coccyx, like you never want to land on your coccyx.
the chances of you landing on your coccyx are very, very minor. Actually, what happens is you land on your tail end here. So you end up with your coccyx sort of being forced back a little bit, but your coccyx is just 4 little bones on the end here. It's like what's left over from a tail.
Yeah.
Okay,
little
if we had a
tail.
tail and we could wag it, it would be the coccyx. All right, but there's the sacrum, and the sacrum's as solid as they come. All right, why? Because what attaches to the sacrum, people, is if we look at our pelvic girdle, it's our hip bones. And this is our pelvis, and it attaches to the sacrum. So the sacrum must be solid. If there's any movement here, whoa, you're going to end up with disjointed hips, and you're not going to be able to walk properly. All right, so
And then
now,
Kathy, Joseph has a really interesting question. Joseph wants to know which part of the skeletons are concerned with both protection and movement. I mean, I can only assume that it would be.
protection and movement would be the head, would be the skull.
Would it
Why?
be the ribs?
You have to, no, because you have to move the head to see danger, but it protects the brain. Your rib cage is able to move, it has to, because people, look here, when you inhale, your rib cage lifts. When you exhale, your rib cage comes down. All right, these are your costal bones. And the muscles in between the costal bones are what causes your rib cage to move up and down. And we'll do that when we do respiration. All right, very important. And also, this sternum, by the way, just while I'm at it, the sternum is made of cartilage, but it is your breastbone. And this little end piece here, the teachers used to love asking, and they still do, is the xiphoid process, this little thing here. And that, if you stick your finger here, you can actually wiggle it. All right, it's made of cartilage.
So
Now,
Kathy, it's made out of cartilage. We had a question earlier saying, what are the different types of cartilage? Like, I didn't even realize.
No, we're going to do different types of cartilage next week.
Okay,
Okay,
guys.
I need to get to this. We're doing cartilage and joints next week.
Okay, fantastic.
All right, so let's just do this. So we've got the cartilage here that joins the breastbone to the ribs. Now, we've got 7 pairs of true ribs, okay? And we have, then we've got a couple. Now, if you look at the true ribs, they're your 7 pairs of true ribs. And then we've got 4 floating ribs. Why? Because their cartilage actually attaches to rib number 7. And so they're your at least your false ribs. And then you have your 2 little ribs dangling here at the back. And they are your false ribs. Okay, I mean your floating ribs. What am I doing? True ribs, floating ribs, false. They're false ribs. Why? Because they don't attach to anything. But they are there to just give protection from the back around your digestive system. Because all the way in here, where your rib cage is, you are going to have a diaphragm which separates them. So you wanted to know what moves? This moves. Okay, but it protects as well. Your hips, during childbirth, they move, people. Your hips will move. Well, clearly if you're a female, because if you were a male, you wouldn't be giving birth to kids. But there you've got a sort of a cartilage process here that actually opens to allow the birth canal open so that the baby can be pushed through. All right, now, pectoral girdle. What do we have? We have the clavicle, right, which is your collarbone and hurts like anything when you break it. Then we have our flat bone at the back here, which is the scapula. And we have a ball and socket joint, which I'm going to do with you again when we do ball and socket joints, but this is one of them. And the humerus. Now, humerus, because you have your funny bone on the corner here. Now, if you bash your funny bone, you know when you bash the corner here and you think, it's so sore. Well, I don't know why they call it the funny bone, because no one laughs. Okay, but it's so funny bone, and you have the humerus. It's funny, humerus here. Then you have a, wait, all right, then you have a hinge joint, because it can only move in one direction. Now, the way to remember these bones, and this is what I'm trying to teach you, is you have the thumb here, all right? So there's the thumb here. And this is the radius, because the thumb can rotate. So the thumb can rotate, the radius is always on the thumb side. And what is underneath here is the ulna. All right, so I'm going to show you on my arm. There's my thumb can rotate. There's the radius bone, and the ulna is underneath. And under starts with a U, and ulna starts with a U. So you never confuse those two. All right. Then, in the hand, we have, okay, let's palm up. All right. We have these bones, those bones, and then we have the fingers. So these bones that make up the wrist are called the carpals. Then you have the metacarpals, because they're in the middle. Remember, meta always means middle. So the metacarpals, so carpals, metacarpals, and your phalanges are your fingers. And guess what? Your toes are also called phalanges. Your hands, we have the carpals and the metacarpals. If we look at the foot, oi, you're going to have to get down here, Morne. In the foot, we have the tarsals with a T. Why? T for toe. So tarsals, the metatarsals, and the phalanges, which make the toes. All right? We almost, I have to finish off now, but okay, let's have a look here. The pelvic girdle, pelvis attaches to the sacrum. All right? Sacrum is solid, so that this pelvis has something really good to bond onto. All right? Now, ball and socket joint, the same with this humerus. We're going to have the same ball and socket joint here at the hip. And here at the knee, because the knee is so sensitive and so, we've got to protect it, it's got this little thing here called the patella. And the patella is made up of cartilage, and that fits here to protect this hole, because your nerves pass through here. That is why it hurts so much when people injure, especially in soccer, when they injure their knees. And that patella, which is the kneecap, moves. Those guys want to go through the roof, literally. All right, now.
Do nerves different sensitivity?
Sorry?
Do nerves different sensitivity? This is a question from Shepherd.
Nerves?
Yeah. So when I suppose when you hit a nerve.
No. Nerves are nerves, okay? Clearly, if you get something in your eye, even though it's the area for sight and your sense for sight, the cornea and the outer layers of the cornea are going to, and the conjunctiva, have nerves there. And those nerves are pain receptors. So your pain receptors are what's going to cause the issue. All right, people, let me quickly finish this. So we've got the kneecap, also a gliding joint. It can only move in one direction. And then, look here. There's the big toe. And in line with the big toe, which is a phalange, remember we've got the tarsals and metatarsals in the middle of the foot. And then this bone. Now, how to tell the difference between these two bones, the same as with the forearm, is this one goes to the big toe, okay, and this one here goes to the side. The radius is on the wider one. It's on the thumb side. The ulna is on the bottom side. It's under. And here we have the tibia is in line with the toe, and the fibula sits. It's this thin bone on the side here, and this is where you get shin splints. It's between the muscle that is between these. So tibia in line with the toe, and the fibula on the side. Okay. And there we go. And shoo, I actually got through it. So people, I hope you now know the skeleton.
Bye, grade 11s.